Before you, and if you don't, there's some extra ones back here. If you see anyone come in late, make sure they get one of those copies. Now, there's quite a bit of information, but we're going to move relatively quickly through a lot of it. One of the things that we don't talk very much about is the positives that come with adversity. None of us would sign up for adversity, including me. I don't want it. I will have to deal with it. And yet adversity, when we recognize in the scheme of how God is able to work in and through that for the outcome for his glory, it's amazing what adversity can really do to move us forward in our leadership and whatnot. So I want to begin with just Genesis. Most of you in this room, you're familiar with this story. But it's in Genesis where Joseph is in prison. He says, so the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, in my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes. I squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup and put the cup in his hand. This is what it means, Joseph said to him. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me, show me kindness, mention me to Pharaoh, get me out of this prison. For I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. So there he is, the cupbearer. He's struggling with this dream that he had. There's interpretation needs to happen. Joseph says, I can tell you what it is, but when I tell you, I want to make sure that you remember me when you go to the Pharaoh. Well, look now at verse 23. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him, which is really interesting. I don't want to go too far off on this, but here's a guy, he has this dream. Here's Joseph interprets it, and the exact thing that Joseph says, he's now at Pharaoh's right hand, and he forgets Joseph? Anyways, Genesis 41, verse 1. When 2 full years had passed, 2 full years of Joseph being in prison, here's the adversity. He was slandered. As you know, his brothers sold him into slavery. So he was slandered, sold into slavery by his brothers. He was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife. If you remember the story, beautiful woman. He's a man of integrity. She entices him over and over and refuses, and she grabs onto him, he flees, and she claims that he tried to rape her. Number 3, he was thrown into prison in spite of doing nothing wrong. And then number 4, he was forgotten by the chief butler. So put all that together. Here's adversity upon adversity upon adversity. We haven't even talked about what happened, previously to, taking a trip and the deal his brothers gave to him. But here's a man under adversity. But in the midst of the adversity, I want us to make sure that we catch over and over the blessings. Genesis 39, verse 2. And the Lord was with Joseph. Now those are powerful words for each and every one of you in Christ. The Lord is with you. Never, ever, ever, ever forget that. Regardless in your happiest times or your lowest times. Regardless of the adversity, the Lord is with us. So the Lord is with Joseph. Verse 3 of chapter 39. Now his master saw that the Lord was with him. Now when did this happen? When Joseph was sold as a slave in a strange land. Chapter 39, verse 21, but the Lord was with Joseph. 39:23, the chief jailer did not supervise anything under Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him. Again, when did this happen? When Joseph was falsely accused, he's thrown into prison, but very quickly, the jailer understood this guy can be trusted. He was put in a position of responsibility. So here's just a point to ponder. Is it possible the thing we run from most often is a thing that God has brought to us to train us? Okay, so hang out on that for just a moment. The thing we run from most often is the thing that God has brought to us to train us. Now, that may seem right now to be a little bit vague, so all we have to do is go to the scripture. Number one, here's advantages of adversity. Adversity allows God to be glorified around others. You got tough stuff happening. You got things that, hey, you didn't want to sign up for, but hey, it's in your lap. This is an opportunity for God to be glorified around others. So here's just a very quick discussion. I want you to name some incidents or persons in the Bible that saw God because of an adverse situation. In other words, what are some stories that are happening in the Bible that we would throw out there right now saying, because of this adverse situation, here was God's blessing. I'll do the first one. Esther. For such a time as this. Excellent. Yep. The thief, Jonah. Jonah's another excellent illustration. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Thrown in fire. What about Daniel? He's thrown in the lion's pit. And here God shows up in the midst of that adversity. Paul's imprisoned. He's stoned. He's flogged. Any others come to mind? Martyred. Yes, Stephen's martyred. If you remember with Stephen, even in the midst of it, he's giving God glory, and he's praising God in the midst of that. If you remember Paul and Silas, they're in prison, and they're doing something really I don't know if I could ever do or would ever do, but they're in prison, and they're worshiping, and they're singing. And they're singing hymns and being a testimony to others around them of God being in the midst of that. God showed up with Abraham and Isaac. You know, take your only son, take him up on that hill, sacrifice him to me. Mary, the mother of Jesus, obviously, another one. Yeah, you're going to give birth to my son, but he's going to die a horrible death. And yet, there was Jesus in the midst of all of that. Moses is at the Dead Sea, has no idea what he's going to do. And I always loved preaching this story because, for me, it's very visual. But just when we think we run out of options, just when we think that we're cornered, just when we think in our adversity there's nowhere to turn, that's when God does the most miraculous for us. And so I would never want to, be following Moses and actually come to that place where in behind you are these Egyptians, the chariots are coming, this is certain death, and look where you have led us, leader. Look what you have done to us. You've put us in an impossible situation. And yet God shows up and parts that sea. It's an incredible story. But it also reminds us that leadership is lonely. You're in position, we'll be talking about this in a little bit tonight, but you're in positions where you're leading, and it can be sometimes the loneliest position that you find yourself in, because you're going to take people places that they don't want to go, or would not normally go, or might even resist going, and it can be very lonely. But when you're engaged with God, and you're engaged with his vision, you're engaged with his purposes, and he's saying, get out there and go, you go. But just a heads up, sometimes leadership is lonely deal. David, pursued by Saul. God shows up. Peter. Here's the key thought with all of that. God uses difficulties to demonstrate his power. So any of you have difficulties? Any of you got some tough stuff going on? Any of you got this place where you're saying, I don't know which way to turn. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what I'm going to do. You may be at the very best place that God could possibly have you, so that God can do what you can't do. So God will show up. And yet, sometimes we tend to run from the very thing that God says, no, I've brought this to train you, to teach you, to develop you. So God uses difficulties to demonstrate his power. And we could give examples of ministry and just how God revealed himself over and over. Difficulties of leading people and starting something from nothing, but how just God would show up at a moment where you're tempted to say it's hopeless. You know, we're in a hopeless situation. And then here comes God. And who gets all the credit then? Certainly not me, but God gets all the credit. He gets all the glory. Number 2 is adversity always provides us with greater opportunity. And there's so much power in the words that we use and how we think. Far too often we are much more negative than we should ever be in our thinking, which then comes out in our talking, in our speaking, and in our communicating. And so, are we going to have a test this Friday? No, you're going to have an opportunity. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to do what? To demonstrate the hard work that you've put in. But we have these negative ideas about difficulties and hard things that we're going to be facing. No, there's always a greater opportunity that God is able to provide for us. So the thought is to eliminate our problems is to limit our potential. Greatest growth in your life or my life almost always comes out of adversity. It does not come from when I'm coasting along and I'm doing well, things are happening, it just seems to be clicking left and right. No, that's not where I've experienced the most growth, whether that's spiritually or whether that's as a leader. It comes out of adversity, trouble, problem. That's where if you allow the process, and God in that process, if you allow that, then that is where you can walk away with just some, I think they're gifts that God gives us in the midst of the tough time. Jackie.
I have a little plaque that I've had for years, but it says, growth is revealed through change. And I don't know how many times I've looked at that when I've got negative thinking going on and reminded, this is an opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, if you couldn't hear in the back, we have a plaque that Jackie says she refers to often. Growth is revealed in change. And so that reveals, whether you're growing or not. But Jackie was saying how often we come back to that because of the opportunity in the change, the opportunity for there to be growth. Number 3, adversity promotes spiritual maturity. Now, are we beginning to see the positives, though? What do you mean? It promotes spiritual maturity. Because of one little decision that I choose to make or you choose to make in your life. And that is whether I choose to become better or bitter. Is that not right? Adversity, troubles, trials, struggles. They'll make you better only, and catch this, if you refuse to let them make you bitter. So straight up, if you've allowed yourself to become bitter, then why are you punishing yourself that way? It's interesting when you look at better and bitter. I don't know why, I just see it. But when I see bitter, here's what I find. That vowel I is in the middle of it. And when I become bitter, I'm in the middle of it. You see, it's I. And we could go on and on and on. Now listen, every one of us in this room, we've been there. Sometimes you become better, and you become a better leader because of that. But other times we become bitter. Now in that whole bitter thing, where there's a bitter root that takes place, we got to deal with that because Satan just loves those moments where we hang out in bitterness. Because here's something for sure. you're stuck in spiritual mud and you're not going anywhere, nor are the people around you going anywhere. Okay? You're stuck. And so it's just a choice. Will I will myself? Will I choose to become better in this situation, or will I allow Satan to, well, for me to hang out on that word bitter? Now, does that make sense? Huh? We're all adults here, right? We all deal with this. I'm tempted to get bitter when I should never be tempted to be bitter. I should be tempted to get better. Now, because I'm becoming better does not eliminate the responsibility a person might have in maybe a betrayal that they had toward me, or a sin that they had against me. Whatever that might be, it doesn't eliminate that. But see, I have no control over that. And it's a wonderful place to come in life when you realize you have no control over anybody else. None. And all control is illusionary. Right, Ed? We were talking at the machine today. Talking about control. And it's true. You lay that statement over anything in your life that you think you have control over. You think you control your health? That can change in a nanosecond. You have no control. You think you control even your spouse? I've dealt for 30-some years. Some 30. This is where, let me dig a hole. Don't you dig the hole, okay? But no, we're going to change our spouse. The only way I ever changed Jackie was I changed myself. That's the only way. The only way she has changed me has not been by badgering, has not been by nagging, has not been criticism, hasn't been by devaluing me and taking away my essence of manhood. It's always because she's changed and she's become a better person and helped lead in our marriage that way. But think about this. You have a choice. Every one of us in this room. You have no control. I have no control. I have 4 kids. I used to think I controlled them. I don't have any. None. I don't have any control of the weather. I don't have any control on any one of your attitudes as you came in tonight. None. The only thing I have control over is right here. And so control this. But how do I control this? How do you control that? That's the role of the Holy Spirit in our lives. The role of the Holy Spirit is He's the one that we relinquish control to. And then He allows us to make decisions that we could never make on our own. Because I'm selfish, because I'm short-sighted, because I tend to hang on to grievances. No, it's the Holy Spirit that comes into all that stuff. And He's the one that moves me, helps move me through that. So hopefully that makes sense. Choose, make a choice. It's a choice. It's a choice to become better or bitter. And this is a big deal. This is a big deal when churches go through struggles. Is that when churches go through struggles, church has to decide, are we going to remain in a better place or are we going to remain in a bitter place? Now, I can't make a choice for that person across the aisle. But you know what? I can make a choice for me. But it is hard work. Simple as that, but not impossible work. So they'll make you better if you refuse to let them make you bitter. Key thought, the pressures of living, they precede the power for loving. Life's hard. And yeah, there are ups in living, but you know what? There are arrows that come shooting at us and darts and sometimes bullets and but it's the pressures of living that precede the power for loving. And do you hear that? The power of loving overcomes everything. And my issue, especially if I choose to hold on some bitterness, my issue is I've loved myself more than I'm willing to love others around me. Now, that's painful even to say that, but hey, it's confession time. I love me. I am madly in love with me. I am. But I know this. You are madly in love with you. Each of you in this room. That's what we come up to every day in our lives. Am I going to choose to love me more than I love others? And that's the tension of life, life. But it's in that living that we are able to move into the power of loving. And the power of loving is I'm able to love even the unlovely because of the role of the Holy Spirit within me. Now, if we don't allow the Holy Spirit to move in and through us, no, we won't be loving people. We'll be focused on self. And then again, I use language. Language that's well, I want to say the word. It indicts me because they're first person language. It's about me, I. So let's move on. Number 4, adversity proves our integrity, as Jackie kind of highlighted with her example there. But the key thought is simply this: circumstances don't make what you are. They reveal what you are. Circumstances don't make, they reveal. Reputation is what others suppose us to be. Every one of us in this room, we have a reputation, but it's only what others suppose us to be. Character, that's what we really are. It's what we really are. And it gets revealed in adversity. Reputation is what man thinks we are. Character, though, that's what God knows we are. Man can think anything he wants, but God knows my character. God knows your character. And I can mask that, I can camouflage that, I can hide that, I can protect that, I can pretend, I can do all these things. But you know what? There's a statement that God makes, and it's definitive. It's about He knows my character. He knows your character. Reputation is what's on your tombstone. Character is what the angels testify before the throne of God. I give no thought to my tombstone. I really don't. I have no care in the world about a tombstone. And I tell Jackie, yeah, put me in one of those incinerators, put me in a jar, you put me there wherever you want me to be, okay? I'm cool with that. Why? I know where I'm going. You see, and what I care about is not the tombstone. I care about what the angels give testimony about. And that's what you should care about too. What do the angels testify before the throne of God about you and me? That's a significant deal. If you remember, it wasn't until the alabaster box was broken that a sweet perfume was allowed to be released in all the room. Sometimes it's not only the brokenness comes to our lives, that the light shines through, and that's where the perfume is released, from the brokenness. Sometimes there's such potential beauty in our brokenness. That's where the light shines through that brokenness. That's like the perfume in that alabaster jar. It gets spilled out, and then a sweet aroma comes from what was locked up inside. Number 5, adversity prepares our hearts for ministry. Genesis chapter 40, verse 5 through 8 says, each of the 2 men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, why are your faces so sad today? We both had dreams, they answered, but there's no one to interpret them. Then Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. This guy has every reason to be bitter. This guy has every reason to hold others in contempt. Everybody else at fault. Everybody else is a problem. Everybody, and be of no benefit, of no help in that immediate environment he found himself in, though he never would have signed up for that. But here's this guy extending ministry in the midst of a very adverse situation. Again, we see the power of God in that. The key thought is the blessings of God are not evident by the lessening of adversity, but by the lessons received from it. So what are the lessons that you're receiving from it? Now, typically, I take more time with this lesson when I'm teaching it, but I have more we need to cover tonight as we close out. But adversity. Does this make, what I have, 5 points, maybe 6 points? You know, it could go on 10 to 12. But just that limited amount of time that we have spent, I hope for each and every one of you that as you reflect, as you go back through this, that you will begin to put legs to it. Life is hard. Satan's got a bullseye on your back. He's always going to be aiming for it. He's going to be trying to hit it. So tough stuff's going to come your way. People are going to disappoint you. People are going to damage you. But it's in the midst of all of this, though, that we have potential for God to shine through the brokenness. We have potential to see God minister in ways we could have never imagined. Here's Joseph. You know, his brothers sold him in a slave, throw him in that dungeon hole, he gets sold into slavery. You know, that's a bad start to begin with. But he's a very intelligent person, but God was with him. And so when God is with you, there tends to be blessing that comes with that. And so the blessing is he's rising to the top, left and right, over and over. But every time it just seems like he's getting to the top, what happens? Bam, here's another adversity, takes him down. But every adversity that he faced, he did not get bitter. He chose to get better. He did not choose to become selfish and a recluse where I just focus on myself. It's all about self-preservation. No, I'm in this deal. How can I be a blessing to others? The jailer didn't take the jailer along to say, this man can be put in responsibility, and I don't even have to look after him because I know he's going to do the right thing. He's a prisoner. And yet, look at the elevation that he gets. And then the interpretation of the dreams. And then next thing we know, he is remembered. He does get out of prison. And he goes on an incredible ministry, if you know the rest of the story, where, you know, the brothers come. You know, there's a famine. And the brothers come. Have you ever put yourself in Joseph's place there? I have. And I'm telling you what's happening to the brothers is far, far, far from what happened to them. But here's this man of grace. Here's this God, this man who understood what you intended for evil. God has turned this into good. And that's worth writing down. And that's worth remembering every day. What darkness, what Satan intends for evil, God has potential to turn that into good. And Joseph's, I think, is just a phenomenal story. We could hang out there for a long time. So many lessons that really surface. Now, before we move on, just any thoughts, anything that's jumping out at you or questions you might have in relationship to this adversity deal, relationship with, better and bitter, etc. Dennis, I thought I saw you. Well, I was...
Teaches you to appreciate what you had before, what God gave you, as an example.
Yeah, there's an appreciation for. That's hindsight. Hindsight's 20/20, right? Don't you wish you had foresight that was 20/20? And I don't. You probably don't either. But 20/20 is the hindsight. But to come away from it and be thankful for. In ministry, I could share so many stories about difficult people, difficult problems, difficult things I had to face. And, it really came to a point where I was going to allow this to ruin me, or I was going to allow this to develop me and to grow me. When you graduate from Bible college, you think you have every answer to the world, and you go right in the midst of it. And your honeymoon in churches used to last a year. They last 6 weeks now, at best. And so... enjoy the honeymoon, but then the honeymoon ends, and that's where reality The reality of the people really begin to show you their true character, their true agendas, their true, issues. And, I was a young guy and coming up against these things that, yeah, I know I was trained for this. I know, I was taught. I know that there was testimony after testimony of what to expect. But boy, once you get into it, oh, wow. This is kind of far, far from what I thought it was going to be. But God grew me, though, through all those tests and those adversities and those hard times. And what's interesting about that is the effectiveness of your ministry elevates because of the adversity. The effectiveness of my counsel, the effectiveness of my sharing with people who were dealing with tough stuff in life. Well, I've already been dealing with that, and God has already, dealt with that, and God's already helped me grow through that. But now I was able to minister to people that if I allowed myself to become bitter, I would have never been of any help to them. Does that make sense? Make sense? George.
So should you go looking for adversity?
Pardon?
Should you go looking for adversity?
Oh, no. Oh, it finds you. You don't have to look for it, George. George says, should we look for adversity? Well, people who look for adversity are the creators of adversity, right? So no, I don't look for it. I don't want to see it. It does, but but I get your point. But in the midst of it is reality of life, adversity. What's going to be the outcome? I'm dealing with a young family. They were on my staff, and the wife has left the husband. It's one of these deals that I would say, I would never say this could happen. It was just one of these deals. But part of what I'm dealing with right now with the young man is, what's he going to become? He has no control over the spouse that decided to take and run and take the easy way out and follow Satan's pattern. But what's this man? What will he become? And how will God, in time, use him? Now, that's not discussion I'm having right now because he would not hear that. He would not understand that. But yet, through experience, I know that if he continues to walk with God and he's submissive to God in the midst of all this and doesn't become what he despises, and that's, again, something maybe you ought to write down. Have I become what I despise? No. It's easy to. But if he does not become what he despises, I like to think about the beauty. I like to think about the restoration of other families because you grew. You allowed yourself to become only what God could help you to become in adverse situations. So, nope, don't have to go looking for it. It's going to find you. Amen? Before we leave tonight, some adversity might find you. Who knows? Any other comments? Just don't look to give it, Janice, okay?
I think something to remember when you are in the midst of adversity is it's a season. That, you journey with God through it. And if you can say, okay, I didn't want this, but here it is. It will only last a season. And there are opportunities in this somewhere. I don't know what they are right now. I think that helps. Take a deep breath, trust God.
Yeah, but another point in that, Jackie's saying, is that when adversity comes your way, understand that there's a season. And we understand seasons. We're in a very short season called fall. Finding that out. Hot last week, and who knows, might have frost tonight. I don't know. But it's a very short season. But here's the thing about seasons of life, though, is that when you find yourself in a situation where, yes, you recognize this is a season, and how will I weather the season? How will I navigate through the season? I determine the speed of that season, though, by my choices every day. Now, if I'm making the wrong choices in the season gets drawn out. And none of us in this room would say, I want to sign up for a season of winter that starts in October and ends in July, right? Okay, Brian would. There's adversity coming your way somehow, some way tonight. Not me. I don't want that season of cold. I want that to be well, what we've been enjoying here. We're mid-October, and first time I'm really being indoors with any kind of a sweater on. That's been wonderful. And I'm hoping that, after December 25th, the weather turns again, it gets warm. I mean, that's what I'm hoping. Now, we want snow for Christmas, because that always makes it better for Santa Claus. Okay, things that leaders can't do. We've been talking about this a little bit on and off over the past few weeks, but I think it's important that we just hang out here for a while and understand some things that leaders cannot do. Another book on my shelf is called Winning. Jack Welch, he outlines what leaders do. And I think I included that in your outline. Is it there? Okay. Leaders relentlessly upgrade their team, using every encounter as an opportunity to evaluate, coach, and build self-confidence. That's a really important point. I love that point right there, though, is that leaders are always looking for opportunities to advance others around you, to grow others around you. And I knew that was a big responsibility, not just I had in ministry, but even now as I engage people. I'm very conscious about this. How do I help them move forward? How do I put a challenge before them that God will take them further ahead? It's very intentional. You're always looking for ways to help build self-confidence in people around you. Number two, leaders make sure people not only see the vision, but they live and they breathe it. And the only way a leader can make sure that you see the vision and that you live the vision is that he lives it. He breathes it. He communicates it. And people are invited in, and then you go together. Number three, leaders get into everyone's skin, exuding positive energy and optimism. Again, I like that because, again, negativity gets you nowhere. And it's easy to speak negatively. It's easy to say things in a way that just kind of, chips away at the character of someone, or chips away at their intelligence, what have you. It's very easy to do that. It's another thing to live in a realm of positivity where, for the energy it takes you to be critical, for the energy it takes you to be negative in that moment or in that season, it takes the same amount of energy to be positive, optimistic. And I always found that to be a choice. Do I choose to be positive or negative about this? Now, some of you in this room, you know how I was raised. My mom raised 6 of us. We were dirt poor. And when I say dirt poor, we were dirt poor. I mean, we were raised in a time when we had multiple winters where we had no heat. And if you can imagine going through a Pennsylvania winter with no heat, and you go home to wrap up in blankets, you stay in those blankets until you go to school. I mean, that was our upbringing. Now, I have a choice I could make every day. I could look back at that and I could be bitter. And I could be negative about it. I could always making these comments that would just take things away from my mom and, take value from her. No, it's not the place to live. I've learned so much about life because I was allowed to live that way. Because I lived life without. It's amazing what I see in life today and what I have. Every day there's this gratefulness, this thankfulness that I have that sometimes is overwhelming to me. Jackie came home, she had lunch for her boss and team today at our house, and one of the first things she said was they really loved our sunroom. And it was interesting because I was already there for an hour, and when I came into our sunroom, I thanked God. God, I thank you every day for this view I have, for this environment that I have. There's this thankfulness. I don't take it for granted because I know what it is to have nothing. I know what it is to have not a dollar. I know what it is to get up on Christmas and not have one present. Not one. Does that make me bitter? No. Life's hard. Adversity happens. But you know what? If you were to meet my sibling sisters, you would not say any of them live in a realm of negativity about our past. But we've overcome that. All that just is to illustrate. I don't know what your life has been. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. You know what? Some of the stuff you've gone through is probably pretty big stuff, pretty bad stuff. But yet you don't have to live in a realm of negativity. Because if you do, Satan gets all the credit. Satan gets all the victory. And it just continues that season over and over and over. Okay, and I'm on point what there? 4. Leaders establish trust and candor, transparency, and credit. Yeah, you establish trust and candor. You're honest. You're authentic. You're not wishy-washy with people. You're not rude either. Number 5, leaders have the courage to make unpopular decisions and gut calls. Yeah, that's why leadership is lonely. Number 6, leaders probe. They push with a curiosity that borders on skepticism, making sure their questions are answered with action. Walsh says in number 7, leaders inspire risk-taking and learning by setting the example. And then leaders celebrate. I mean, all of that is really, if you want to read a helpful book, that's what it's just called Winning. It's one worth getting on leadership. But it's good stuff. This is what leaders do. But much of what's being written about leadership these days, it really centers on things that leaders have to do, what they should do, what they ought to do, what leaders must do. But there's very little written about what leaders can't do. Specifically, what Christian leaders cannot do. And I believe that list, especially for Christian leaders, be every bit as important as the list that we just read, because it would include but not be limited to the following things. Things a leader cannot do. Number 1, leaders cannot be politically correct. Now, that just eliminates half the churches in this nation because they're stepping on one another to become more and more politically correct so they can be in the right political stance. A politically correct Christian leader is an oxymoron. Okay, one cancels out the other. That's what that means. Christian leader. If you're politically correct, no. Leaders, specifically Christian ones, must be biblically correct. That will ensure that you are never politically correct. Now, don't miss that. If you are biblically correct, you will never be politically correct. Isaiah 59, some of you are very familiar with this passage, but it's so relevant for the time that you and I are living in right now. Where Isaiah says, truth falls dead in the streets. Hey, you been there? Are you there? Fairness is outlawed. Yes, truth is gone. Anyone who tries to live a godly life is soon attacked. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And yet here we are today in a postmodern world, a post-Christian world. This is not, we're no longer in a Christian era. This is a post-Christian. And so in a post-Christian era, you have postmodernism. Postmodernism is, hey, you make up whatever you want to make up. My truth may not be your truth, but you know what? I'm sticking by my truth, and you have to agree with my truth. There's the downfall right there. It's how I choose to live with this same-sex partner. These are the ethics I choose to have in my business practices. It's my truth. And you've got to agree with it. You see, that's what popular media is all about. Hollywood. The joint effort of how they're using language and how they're twisting things to say to you and me, if you're not on the page that they're on, then we're rebels. Well, Neanderthals, really, would be what most would say. We cannot be politically correct. This is a situation we face every day. I mean, it's a fact that political correctness, it's a religion. It is worshipped. And again, that just illustrates this. Don't ever think that our nation is without spiritualism. Our nation is without religionism. It's there. We all worship something. But what you're seeing, people who are far from God, people who are living in this post-modern world, they're not worshiping God, but they're worshiping this political correct obsession. And it is obsession. It's the obsession of our generation right now, this woke generation. So much so that anybody who dares stand up, anyone who speaks the truth, anybody who dares to live a godly life, you can count on it. You will be attacked. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. You will be. Now, if you have any measure of doubt about this, maybe you'll go to work tomorrow. If you're not going to work and you're retired and just living the dream like the Smiths, maybe go to the mall. But you go someplace public. And you just announce, whether that's to your coworkers or that's to your fellow shoppers, that you believe homosexuality is a sin. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. You take a definite stance, a biblical stance. Or you tell them you believe marriage ought to be between only one man and one woman, period. Or tell them that you believe that abortion is a sin. Again, no ifs, ands, and buts about it. From moment of conception, afterwards, abortion, I believe be dead wrong. Go to work. Go downtown. Make the announcement. Because I can tell you this. You say any one of these things, which incidentally are all taught in the Bible, biblically, explicitly. Believe me, it will be, as Elijah said in Isaiah, you will be attacked. Who signs up for attacks? Who signs up for adversity? And so what we have are churches that are full of people who are just beside themselves to accommodate the political correctness and to give off the sense of arrival. We've arrived where your intelligence has taken us. Thank you. And those churches will be damned. Your coworker is going to pounce on you. Not all of them. Some of them have a faith belief system, I'd like to think. You'll be called everything, from a bigot to a hate monger. You'll be criticized. You will be ostracized, and even from your own family members. You'll be ostracized. And depending on what you do for a living, you might even be disciplined, you could be demoted, and you can be fired. You can be released of your job if you do not align yourself, boom, with political correctness. You're seeing it all the time. Yeah. Even in the service. You want to hold somebody accountable? Your rear end will end up in prison and in jail. We're living it. We're seeing it. Here's a 17-year hero for America, but stands up and says, what you've done and what you're doing is dead wrong, because look at the casualties of loss of human life in Afghanistan. Somebody needs to be held accountable. So men above me, is what he's saying, stand up. Take accountability. Well, that's as far politically as you can possibly go. But I revere him, I respect him, because this one he drew a line in the sand, and he says, here it is, and I'm going to step over it. I've seen what you defined here, but I'm not living in it. So I'm just saying, as leaders, you cannot be politically correct. Truth falls dead in the streets. Truth is gone. And anyone who tries to live a godly life is soon attacked. So, what arena of leadership do you have? Whether that's in your home, or whether that's in the marketplace, or in your place of employment, or whether that's in a ministry, a position of leadership here for FCC. Listen, truth is dying more and more, but it ought to be becoming more and more alive every day among us in our family, our church family. It's probably enough said on that, and we'll move on. Number 2. Leaders cannot obsess with finding common ground. You can't do it. Let the counselors, let the negotiators, let the arbitrators do that. That is their job. Leaders define the ground for us, and it will never be common ground. Never. Rather, it will be an uncommon ground. So this is something I'll speak into potential elders. You define this ground. And this ground that you will define will be very uncommon in the midst of 21st century today in our churches. Be very uncommon. Genuine leaders take us to places we would never get on our own. They do that by leading us, not by asking everyone else in this group circle, where would you like to go today? What would you like to see us do? That is not leadership. It's a recipe for disaster, whether that's your business or whether that's your church. It's a recipe for disaster. You can't obsess about finding common ground. Leaders are courageous. It takes a lot of courage to go against the crowd. It takes a lot of courage to be a visionary. It takes a lot of inner strength to do what you think is right, even though it may not be easy. Too many leaders are taking an easy way out. We live in a world where so many people walk the path of least resistance. So I'm just saying, authentic leadership, the genuine deal, the real deal, is all about taking the road that is less traveled and doing not what's easy. Come on, do what's right. Period. Do what's right. Number 3. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Before I'm moving kind of quickly now. Make sense? Okay, so number three, leaders can't take a pass on problems. Okay? If you're a leader, you're a leader. You can't take a pass. Genuine leaders diffuse problems instead of ducking problems. There's nothing wrong, bothers me more than for this person to call themselves a leader and not be taking on the issues that need to be taken on, but are ducking the issues. I have some pet peeves. That's one of them. Why? Because God raises up to be leaders, to be problem solvers. Not problem shifters here and there, and are willing to do whatever it takes. Even, listen to me, if it means great personal sacrifice in order to bring about a resolution, you're willing to pay the price. And any level of leadership, you will pay a price. Any sense of authentic leadership, you'll pay a price. But we live in such a milquetoast world anymore. And I can't speak for the women, but I speak about men. I speak to the men. What in the world happened to our backbone? Why are not men standing up? Why are not men being men and fighting for what needs to be fought for, whether that's in our home, whether that's in our community, whether that's in our churches? There's nothing wrong with fighting in a biblical sense. It's what leaders do. No, if I'm an elder, I'm a fighter. Because I'm the overseer of souls. And as an overseer of souls, there are wolves all around. And I've got to fight them. Why? Because the love and responsibility I have for the sheep, or the sheep is this. What's sheep plural? Sheeps. long-standing arguments. Is it deer or deers? Anyway, what was my point? What?
Overseeing the soul.
Oh, yes, overseeing the souls of people. But are you fighting for the souls of people? Now, fighting sometimes means you got to get up and ugly with the soul. Requires confrontation. Because here's a soul that's leaving the narrow path. And you can see it as clear as day. They're taking the road that's most traveled. They're taking a road that is broad. They're taking a road of no obstacles. It's easy peasy. And they're getting further and further and further away from God's intentions for their lives. That's what leaders do. You take the risk. You love a person enough to say, what in the world's going on? Here's what I see. Here's what's happening. How can I come alongside of you and help you back on this path? We'll go this path together. Now, it's very narrow, so, the leader has to lead and followers behind. You can't push the follower. You've got to be out in front and lead them. So, it's fighting for the souls of people. Now, here's a question. I always deal with leaders. Do you believe there is a heaven, and do you believe that there's a hell? Our actions don't show it. Our actions are, we'll stand and fight the toughest fights we have to fight for the well-being of the souls under our care, for well-being of our family, well-being of our community. You see, do you believe that there, in our minds, is there a hell? Yes. Is there a heaven? Yes. But has our heart embraced the reality that there are men and women and young people who, if they were to die apart from Christ, they will go to a Christless existence forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever? If we think temporal, if we think all life is just about the here and now, and is this person going to be upset with me if I say this to them? You've lost all sense of eternity. And when you lose sense of eternity, you will also lose your courage and your authority to speak loving truth into people, into souls that need to be cared for and shepherded and move forward. And we can't stay anymore on that point. Number 4, leaders can't avoid confrontation. They don't enjoy it. They don't go looking for it. And they don't make it, but they don't avoid it either. Yeah, it's just a simple way to see this. It's like driving a car. You're driving a car. You don't aim for the potholes, right? They just happen. Mysteriously, magically, boom, here's a pothole. Didn't see, I couldn't avoid it, but here it is. Now, there's going to be plenty of potholes. There's plenty of pitfalls in the road ahead. So that's why leaders, as you know, I'm visual, but I see leaders, that's why we drive carefully. That's why we drive with a focus, leaders. That's why we drive purposely. But you still drive. And I said it once a week or so ago. It really bears worth repeating. Authentic leadership is all about taking the road that's less traveled and doing not what's easy. It's about doing what's right. Number 5, leaders can't pull punches. That's what politicians do. So do actors. That they may work in a world of make-believe. But it does not work in the real world. A genuine leader can't and won't pull punches. E.V. Hill used to say, I wouldn't trust a man who throws a rock then hides his hand. See, some have no problems taking a stand at home. By golly, this is the way it's going to be. By golly, this is the way I want it to be. It's privacy. But when you're placed square in the public's eye, or eyed in the public square, they clam up. And they get wishy-washy. And then you see very quickly they back down. It's not leadership. Christian leaders dare not flinch in the face of opposition, or they'll be done on day one. Because leaders never hesitate to say what needs to be said or do what needs to be done. But listen to me, that doesn't mean you're a rude brute, but it means you're honest. And it means you deal with the reality of what needs to be dealt with. And it means I'm not pulling any punches here. In light of eternity, we don't have time to play these games with one another. Let's deal with it. Number 6, leaders can't hand off hard decisions. I'm distracted right now. I'm getting texts that are coming in. I didn't realize how much cash you guys left. How much did I leave? We're in Columbus visiting our son. Anyways, that's called a bunny trail. That's called chasing a rabbit. Number 7, leaders can't run when it gets tough. Because you can count on it. Things are going to get tough. And again, it doesn't matter what realm of leadership that is. It's tough to be the leader of your Christian home, to be the man of the home, to be a leader in leading your wife and leading your kids. It's tough. That doesn't mean just because it's tough, you bail and you run and you look for greener grass somewhere else. And some of you are old enough to know what Irma Bombeck says about that, right? Greener grass, on the other side of the fence, it's always on a septic tank. Isn't that true? I've seen men and women do this over and over and over and over. They graze in somebody else's pasture, only to find out it's over top of septic, a sewer. Look at the consequences. It bears itself out. So you can't run when it gets tough. But when the going gets tough, leaders don't leave, they lead. It's because that's your job, to stay on deck in the midst of the storm. That means you keep your hand at the helm. That means that you're guiding the ship. Where? You're guiding the ship to safe harbor. That's what. Yeah, storms are coming. Might be fierce winds that you come up against. Wicked waves, even a cowering crew can't keep the captain of the ship away from where he's supposed to be. Number 8, leaders can't do it on their own. The leader who tries to do it all by himself is not a leader. She or he is a nutcase. Now the nuts all laughed. We've all been there. We've all done that. And it's the insanity of this. It's insane to try to do it all on your own. God, listen, again, God will raise up around you the necessary people to help you lead. Welcome them. Extend a hand to them. They may not have everything top-notch like what you think you are, but you can lead them where they're not. But that's my job. It's your job. As far as ministry, it's always been from day one, how do I assemble a top-notch team around me? It never ends. It's always ongoing. And what was top-notch 5 years ago does not mean that is top-notch today. It evolves, it's always changing. And so the leader recognizes that and is always bringing and inviting people who, the best leaders are the leaders who invite people who are ahead of them to be on a team. Insecure leaders will not do that. Insecure leaders will pull people into that arena that they are ahead of. Now we're not talking about leadership. Now we're talking about management. Because when I do that, I manage people. I don't lead them. That's a lesson itself, because it's a lesson the church and we need to hear as Christians, that management is not leadership and leadership is not management. And most churches, my observation, my experience, and my working with churches, most churches are overmanaged and underled. Doesn't have to be that way for a Christian. I mean, men and women, you're sitting here for 6 weeks now. You're learning these principles, you're learning these precepts, you're getting, an appetite for, what, there could be something more to life, there could be something more to my engagement in this thing called the world, and God's working, and you know what? Choose leadership. Don't choose management. Management's just so lifeless. Assemble top-notch people around you. The best leaders, they go after the better leaders. Let me tell you, you have to really deal with this. And I know in ministry, I brought people on staff who were far ahead of me. And I tell you what, it was the best thing for me. Because they took me places that I wasn't. I also took them some places. But the nice thing about that is it's easy to release them. Now, I don't say fire. Release them to the bigger deals that God really has planned and prepared for them. But get quality people. Because you can count on this. Pulling no punches. Only an immature, insecure leader would seek to surround himself with lesser leaders. Leaders, you've got to recognize your weaknesses. Recognize them. And bring in people who are strong in those areas. My weakness is administration, and people who know things that I write and things that I can put together agendas and plans and schematics, and I can do that, but that is not my strength. That is work. I mean, it is work. But I can hire a Mike Shryock who lives and breathes administrative details. And he's happy. And he smiles while he's doing it. And he loves it. And he's energized by it. Not me, I'm not energized by it. But I know how necessary it is. And so sometimes those are just the best hires, is that you look for people who are well qualified beyond where you are in your arena of weakness, and you bring them alongside, and look at what happens to the team. Because here's what Mike could never do. Mike couldn't lead teams. He couldn't be on a platform, and he could not present a sermon in a way that would be compelling and would be inviting for people to take their next step. It's just not his makeup. It's not who he is. But let me tell you, he's every bit of value on that team as I am, is the point. And hopefully you're getting the point. Understand your weaknesses. And especially as you look at a staff. As you're putting staff together, take the time to understand what's the weaknesses of our current staff team, or what's the weaknesses of an oncoming staff member, and how will we staff down the road? How will we bring strength in order that the team is strong together? Again, it just takes time. It takes sometimes imagination and intuitiveness and whatnot. But just recognize your weakness. Bring people in who are strong in those areas. Number 9, I believe, leaders can't become content with the status quo. Let me say it again. Leaders cannot become content with the status quo. And part of the tension I felt for many years with my leadership team, with my eldership, is that they're very quick to find a place where they're content with status quo. And the tension that would arise is the tension that I had to bring to them. What are we doing? We're stalled. We're not going anywhere. Why are we just duplicating this thing over and over and over, hoping for a different result? That's insanity. Was it Einstein that said that? Einstein said that. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting and wishing and hoping for a different outcome. Not going to happen. And so there's always change that's taking place. But as a point position with my eldership team was sometimes to not pull punches with them. You call a spade a spade. We're resting on our laurels. And if we rest on our laurels, we need to understand, again, we believe that heaven and hell are real, and that real men and real women in our community are going to go to a Christless existence for eternity unless the church is the church. Now, when you keep that focus, the infighting gets a little bit less. I mean, how can you fight about that? Really? Focus on what needs to be focused on. There's so many souls that need to know Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. How can we accept just the status quo? Einstein did say this: imagination is more important than knowledge. It's from our imagination, that's where great things are born. Authentic leaders dare to dream impossible dreams. They see, listen, they have the ability to see what everyone else sees, but then dreams up the new possibilities. That's what leaders do. They spend a lot of time with their eyes closed and creating blueprints, or I call them fantasies. I was more comfortable with that. Here's creating my fantasy. That lead to better products, that lead to better services, that lead to better workplaces, that lead to deeper value, and on and on. So how often do you close your eyes to imagine? How often do you close your eyes to dream? So again, I'm saying to each of you, until you prove otherwise, you're leaders. That's one of the assignments. Why not close your eyes for a while this week? Invite God in. You start just taking this bird's eye view of the FCC family and the FCC community that surrounds it, and just begin to dream and imagine what the possibilities could be. What might that look like? And journal. Don't be afraid to write it down. This guy's going to bring some really cool things. And there are going to be things that people are going to hear you say it, and they're going to say, you're crazy, you're nuts. Yeah, I know. We're doing it anyways. Let's move. Again, when you believe heaven and hell are of absolute truth, and that real people go to heaven and real people go to hell. It's what the church is about. Right? We're to rescue, what's that hymn? Rescue the perishing. Is that it? No. Rescue the perishing. Have we forgotten that? No. If we become just this sense of inward-looking club thing, we don't rescue anyone. It's about self-preservation with one another. And listen, that just is it's not the dream of God's church. Number 10, and finally, leaders can't take a break from being a leader. Because I know once in my life I accepted the mantle of leadership. I'm a leader at all times. And I lead in how many different, I'm not in a formal setting now with my staff team on a Monday morning for 2 hours. I'm not with a group of elders right now on once or twice a month and meeting in that way, but I'm still leading. And I try to lead people when I engage people, when I have conversation with people. I'm trying to lead them to another place, a closer place to where God wants them to be. I can't take a day off. I can't take a vacation from that, and you can't either. In your home, you can't take a vacation from being a leader. Well, you could, but I'll tell you the outcome. You can't let your guard down. You don't take a break from being married. You don't take a break from being a parent, from being a Christian. You don't take a break from being a leader either, a Christian leader. If you do, and you forget or ignore your priorities and your principles, you're headed to just destruction. You're headed for a world of hurt and a world of pain. One example. It was said of King David, 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 1. In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David, he remained in Jerusalem. You know what the very next verse tells us? He remained in Jerusalem, and he's hanging out in a place he shouldn't have been hanging out. And he's hanging out in a place that he lingered longer in a way he should never have lingered longer. Incidentally, that's lust. That's my jingle for it. Lust is, it's not looking at a woman or looking at a man and say, wow, you know, that's attractive. That's not lust. But when I linger and I stay there, that's lust. Is that clear? I mean, in my mind, it's clear. So, as we close, leadership is hard work. In fact, it's one of the toughest assignments a person's ever going to be given. But I'm telling you, once you've been given the task, you're going to learn in short order that the real luxuries of leadership, they're very few. Remember the triangle? You know, the higher we rise up in leadership, the less rights that we have and the more responsibilities that we have. But the luxuries are few, and the miseries can oftentimes seem to be innumerable. They might even seem to be overwhelming. In our world, more specifically, our churches are in dire need of some genuinely great leaders, but they won't come from a bunch who are signing up because of the benefits. If you sign up to become a leader because of the benefits, you will be destructive. You will destroy anything that you're trying to lead. It's on the contrary. Great leaders always come from those individuals, men and women, who sign on because they're willing to bear the burdens. That's what leaders do. And oh, God's church needs leaders, men and women, who will bear the burden of leadership. That's what we do. So I want to thank you for 6 weeks of entertaining me here, and you've been faithful. I've been really appreciative of that, of your attention to detail and filling in all these blanks. I said from the very beginning the reason we put energy and effort into that. You've just compiled yourself. Just this little, to me it's a resource. It's a tool to refresh you along leadership journey and to help you become even more. But make sure that you're making application. And you know what? If some things have been frightening you, you know here's a step I need to take, here's a direction I need to take, and it's kind of, it's throwing you off and it's scaring you a little bit, do it anyway. Do it anyway. And why not let God do what you can't do? That's where the fun is. When God's doing for you what you know you're not capable of this. You know you can't do this. But it is a journey. Any last thoughts? Any last questions? Any last argument? Now, I saw that as a wave, was it? Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah. It's one of my sweet spots, and I get to do this, and I love doing it, and have some more opportunities for that to happen, and possibly even to come back and do another 6 weeks down the road might be a possibility when time frees itself. But there's a study I've done, and it's a 6-week leadership lesson on the book of Nehemiah. and that whole rebuilding of the temple. It's just a fantastic study. But every verse, it's like this leadership principle just jumps off the page from it. It's just really a fun leadership journey to take with people. Again, leadership, it all comes from the Word of God. So look at these stories and begin to look at them in ways that leaders interpret things. And then be bolstered with courage because you've seen this is what God was able to do with that man, what God did with this woman. And maybe for such a time as this, maybe God can do that with me. It's not for the faint of heart. Amen? It's not. So cling closely to Jesus and be up close to people that love you enough to hold you accountable, and with people who love you enough to go out in front of you and say, follow me as I follow Jesus. So thank you, and I look forward to the fruit that God is going to produce in your lives, and together